Welcome to Roundhill Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we talk about when we talk about faith.
So welcome to everybody on Roundhill Radio. We have a special guest today, and we love having guests. And actually, this guest is someone who was with us, believe it or not, about 4.5 years ago. And Leslie Kahns, our Director of Digital Ministries, interviewed you. And so welcome, Adam Smedberg. You're working with Church World Service, and we are delighted to have you as part of our podcast.
Thank you for having me again. It was great to join you here. It's hard to believe it's been 4.5 years. You said, I mean, it's like, wow, COVID being was probably the year before COVID. And then,
Yes.
With everything shut down for a few years, it kind of adds up, but you don't even start to even think back to those times beforehand.
It's amazing, isn't it? I think a lot of us have started to think of before the pandemic, after the pandemic, right? In sort of
I believe so.
terms.
It'll be interesting to see as time goes on, how historians and how folks will look back at this time and how we responded and how things have gone since then. So,
yeah. Well, it's a thrill to have you as our guest. And Adam, I'm actually going to repeat a couple of questions that you answered all the way back in 2019, because we'll have a different listening audience now. And our listening audience, covers a lot of the, the country, the region, and even we have some international listeners. So we're always delighted to have them as part of our show. So let's just start off by saying, please tell us a little bit about Church World Service, its origins, and let's start there.
Sure. CWS, we've been around since 1946.
Okay.
We started, in the wake of World War II, a group of church communities came together. And as we say, they came together to do together what we do more together than we can apart. And
I love that.
The idea was they worked with farmers in the Midwest and in some of the southern regions to gather seed as well as wheat grain, and shipped it to Europe to support farmers there whose land was devastated during World War II. And since then, our programs have only grown. As I talk to a lot of folks, CWS's work can be split into 3 different pillars, or as I would like to call them, our pillars of mission focus: international and domestic support of refugees and migrants. We do work internationally and domestically to support families affected by natural disasters, hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes, and then finally, food and water security in countries that really see a struggle, right? Because, with climate change and with other things going on, there's significant issues and trouble. But we always try to look to make sure that our work is long-term and sustainable. And I'll give you a great example of that. Marisabit County is in Kenya, and it's a very dry and desolate area. And there, children would have to walk the equivalent of 50 laps around the high school track. Now, I don't know how many track and field folks are listening. That's about 12 miles, or if I remember correctly from my days. I didn't run; I threw shot. But there, if we got out of line, we were running for a little while. So I don't ever recall having to do 50 laps though around the track, but it's significant. So we were able to set up a water pump. We were able to sink a borehole almost 2,000 feet into the ground to hit a water table. It's solar powered, and it can produce up to 2,200 gallons of water a day. Now, the community does pay a small fee for the filtered water, and that's because it goes through a biofilter. And the idea is that when the time comes and that filter is no longer any good, they have the funds to replace that. But then also members of the community are trained to know what to look for when that filter is no longer usable, or know how to change it. And they're able to do that. Now, but if we were doing this in person, I'd be showing you the different types of. I take with me a 5-gallon jerry can when I visit schools or different groups, and I talk about how the children starting at the age of 12 have to carry that jerry can every day, and
Mm.
um, take to gather the water. So now that the water is in the community, they don't have to carry that water anymore. So what do you do with
Mm.
those kids?
Mm.
Build a bigger
Mm-hmm.
school. Now the kids can,
Mm.
those young girls
Wonderful.
can get educated. But now you need
Right.
to build a bigger
Right.
school. You need to hire more teachers. You need to hire healthcare
Right.
professionals who know how to take care of the girls. And now
Sure.
we're starting to see the girls in this community take primary exams and be able to start looking at a life beyond the life in their community.
Wow. Exciting.
It is because for so many,
Mm.
they're taught that what low value they have because it's a life of serving the family and then serving a husband that they've probably been married into for a cost.
Sure.
And
Mm-hmm.
now they have the freedom to be able to do so much. And
Mm.
it's looking at the communities like that and seeing how can we spread this and ensure that
Mm.
all families and all children have the opportunities that they need.
Yeah. The word that comes to mind as you were talking is the word culture. We talk a lot these days about changing the culture
Mhm.
or creating a culture that's capable of changing those things that are obstacles to a flourishing life. And that sounds like an extraordinary example of how, the addressing a basic human need of hydration begins to radiate out and touch more and more lives and gradually transform the culture of that community, eventually bringing flourishing life to everybody in it.
Yes.
So
And that's our goal,
extraordinary.
and that's what our work with the crop walks goes to fund. We
Mm-hmm.
have over 500 crop hunger walks throughout the country that raise money to do
Mm-hmm.
programs like this. Um, and I've been with CWS now for almost 7 years, and I can tell you this
Mm-hmm.
is the most rewarding work I have ever been a part of.
Yeah, it must be extraordinarily gratifying when you're getting news and feedback, especially in contrast to, some of the other facets of the news that we receive each day that are not nearly as encouraging as that.
Agreed.
Um,
Yes.
yeah. Adam, I have this memory of my daughter, Katrina, when she was about 2 years old. The very first mission trip, I will say, that we ever took together was a crop
Oh,
walk.
nice.
And it was in Concord, New Hampshire. And every year and then eventually we added her brother to the process. And so that's how Katrina and Kyle were first introduced to the idea of service, was through Church World Service annual crop walks, funding programs like this from citizens across the country, right?
Yep.
Just taking advantage of the normal process of walking, but dedicating it towards a
Yep.
cause.
And many of our walks, the way we describe the walk is we walk the same distance that these families walk every day. And so
Mm.
when
Hmm.
so when you hear the stories of some of these older walks, they talk about how they
Mm.
would walk 15 miles,
Yes.
and quoting my grandparents, uphill both ways and in the snow. But those distances, because of these projects, have cut this distance down to just over 3 miles. And
Wow. Wow.
that is the amazing change that we are seeing. And, you talk about the change in culture and what it takes, not only the change that we see in the communities that we serve, but in the communities here to serve and to understand what it is
Mm-hmm.
to serve. I had the opportunity to speak at a church in Springfield, Massachusetts last year
Mm-hmm.
with a youth group there. And,
Mm-hmm.
we're doing the kits next week.
The disaster relief
Yeah.
kits.
Which
Yeah.
ones are we making? Or is it those ones or the
I
hygiene
think when
kits?
we do it at Round Hill, I think we're doing hygiene
Hygiene
kits.
kits.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the different kits that CWS has with these students, and and letting them kind of choose which kit they want to do as a service project. And these two young girls, probably not probably between 10 and teenage, in that age range, talked about the importance of education, that all kids should have a right to access to education, looking at the education kits. And all I'm thinking to
Hmm.
myself is, when I was in the early 90s, I'm going to, not say how old I was, but back in the early 90s,
You're among friends.
when I was their age, that wasn't something that kind of caught something to me. It was,
Uh-huh.
there were other things that I was thinking about, but I was so amazed that was the attitude, that, we need to do
Mm,
what we can to make sure that children everywhere have that access to an education that helps them and builds and
yeah.
makes them better. So I was greatly impressed, and, um, look forward to kind of seeing see how those attitudes are in other communities. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Adam, tell us about your specific role within Church World Service. And has that stayed the same or has it evolved over the years?
So it has evolved. I still work with crop hunger walks, as well
Hmm.
as congregations. Where it has evolved is now, instead of just being New England, it is New England and New York. Um,
Okay.
and in some cases, it's trying to describe to my managers that Rochester is not as close to Albany as they seem to think. Because they're like,
Right.
hey, can you go out to the Rochester area next time you're in Albany? I'm like, that's 4 hours in one direction.
Exactly. That's New York is bigger than you might think it is. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Um, so where it grown is working with more populations and working with more
Mm,
communities, um, and also, we talked about the pandemic before. It's re-engaging with
mhm.
communities that, since the pandemic, we may not have heard from, and just, kind of get
Sure.
reaching back to them and letting them know what we're doing, because
Hmm.
prior to the pandemic, our work is different than it is now. And I'll explain that in a couple different areas.
Hmm.
One, our kids program, for example. When we talked 4.5 years ago, we had 3 kits. We've now grown that to 5. We've
Mm,
added what we call our period pack, is a women's health kit, because
okay.
we saw that we were what we had seen was that, over 32 million women here in the United States do not have access to the hygiene materials that they need on a monthly basis.
Wow. Oh, oh, good
Um,
heavens.
as a matter of fact, so you mentioned New
Hmm.
Hampshire. I was actually this
Hmm.
past weekend up in Pembroke at the New Hampshire
Oh, hmm.
UCC Prepare to Serve event.
Okay.
And the conference, as a fundraising service element to it, raised funds for 700 period packs, and then they assembled these period packs during the event.
Wow.
And you should the response from the churches and from the folks there was amazing. Everyone kept coming up, going, "What do you need our help with? What can we do now?" And
Mm.
so
Oh,
for some, it was, jump into an assembly line and help assemble. For some, it was, hey, we're low on pads. Can you help us count 10, 10 in a pile and get them ready for the next group that's
hmm.
going to come through? But they assembled 700 period packs in just under 5 hours. Um,
Wow.
yeah, that was incredible. And um, leading into that, our warehouse in Elkhart, Indiana, was empty. We had just sent out the last of
Oh,
them about a week or so ago. So
oh my goodness.
people were energized. They wanted to help, um, and so they this so it's programs like that, that I am
Yes.
working
Yep.
with. We're hoping to do some things with the SNEUCC, the New England Methodist Conference, and different
Hmm.
folks, with different events that they have, and see where we can add a mission element to help serve others in need. Um,
Wow.
and one other thing I'll just tell you, talking about changing programs between now, since we chatted 2019 and today, is in our work in Moldova. Now,
Mm.
be honest. If I showed you a map, would you be able to point to Moldova right now? Or
I might not be able
okay,
to.
believe me, I ask this question every time I talk about Moldova in the church, and everyone kind of looks at me. I make it two hands, and I'm like, really? Do you really? And so Moldova is on the western border of Ukraine. It is a
Hmm.
small, poor country, about 2.5 million people.
Hmm.
Since Ukraine was invaded 2 years ago, they have taken in over 800,000 Ukrainian refugees.
Mm.
And as I
Wow.
tell a lot of folks, if you think about what it would happen in Connecticut if the population of Rhode Island all of a sudden came in.
Mm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
um, so we are doing work with refugee centers. We are doing work supporting not only uh, Ukrainian refugees, but also Moldovan
Hmm.
families and children, and doing programs to bring them together. Um, as so people aren't feeling that they're, well, you're just here for us for this. Once things
Sure.
resolve, you're going to leave. And we're telling them, no, we're here for the long
Mm.
term. We're here until
Mm.
everyone is taken care of. Well,
Adam, just a quick
sure.
question on that. So, in your work with Moldova, are you then also recruiting or training people on the ground there in addition to Church World Service staff? So how can you, because the need is so enormous and the challenges, how does that work?
So initially, what it was we so we'll go back 2 years ago to when the invasion started.
Hmm.
The first thing we did was an assessment of the countries surrounding Ukraine to see where our
Hmm.
impact could have the greatest. We looked at Poland, Romania,
Hmm.
Moldova, and we chose Moldova because we already had a presence there. Moldova is one of those
I see.
countries we refer to as an energy poverty country. What that means
Okay.
is what families pay for their electricity is the same as what they pay for a rent or mortgage. Now, I
Mm.
don't know about you. I know what I'm paying for my mortgage on my house. I could not
Hmm.
afford that again to give to, National Grid,
Provide electricity.
Eversource, those guys. Just not going to happen. So what we've been doing
Mm-hmm.
is in many community centers, we've been setting up solar paneling in
Great.
schools and in other public areas. We found one school, they didn't have access to hot water at
Mm.
all because they
Mm.
couldn't afford the energy for it. And you think about a school, those kids, aren't able to wash their hands appropriately.
Hmm.
They're not able to wash the food or the dishes. So by setting up the solar panels, the school then had access to hot water,
Wow.
and it
Wonderful.
was able to help
Wonderful.
provide that level of support. Um,
Wow.
so, and that work will continue even after everything was resolved with Ukraine. Um, However that looks and whenever. I'm not going to get into any kind of political or sides on that situation. But it just to say that we want to see this resolved as peacefully and as um, as can be. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. But you're making a long-term, Church World Service is making a long-term commitment to be there
yes,
as and to continue to respond to people's needs. You did touch upon a subject that is near and dear to our hearts because since the last time we spoke to you, we've solarized our entire campus at Round Hill Community Church.
nice.
So, yeah, you'll have a chance to see that. So we're especially glad to hear that whenever solarization happens, it's helping people. It's also good for the earth, and makes a lot of really good things possible for everyone.
Yes,
So really, really glad to hear that. I have a question which will take us away from the international side of this for just a moment. You had mentioned that you're reaching out to congregations now who maybe because of the pandemic, had decreased some of their mission efforts. Certainly, we all noticed changes, during these past 4 years. Um, we've also been watching for longer than 4 years the gradual reduction in numbers in church, communities where people have begun to slowly drift away from congregations in some cases where they've been involved in congregations for many years. Even those people have started to step away. What are you noticing, Adam, as you reach out to congregations to look for congregational support
Mhm.
for Church World Service? Are you seeing resurgence? Are you, what is it that you're observing?
Well, it's interesting you say that because, the kids program we find is a great way to bring folks into the building. For many churches we hear about,
Mm-hmm.
they were
Yep.
using Facebook Live or YouTube Live, to live stream the services in
Yep.
2020, 2021, and many have continued to do that to this day. It's funny
Indeed. Yep.
um, my history, I lived in Kentucky for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I relocated back to Massachusetts, the church I had left was already doing live streaming services. So for a
Mm-hmm.
short time before I had found a church up here, they kind of used me as a guinea pig to,
Mm.
watch the service, see if there's any glitches, if there's anything, you're noticing, let us know.
Sure.
So I do think that I think technology helped a lot of churches through 2020 and 21. Um,
For sure.
and I think it's good to still have that option. If you have folks who are either on vacation or people who are in homes who cannot leave, if they're in nursing centers or places like that where they're not able to go to a church, they have that option to live stream and bring the church into where they are,
Mm-hmm.
and stay connected. Because we know for so many, a church family is so important,
Right.
as a way to stay connected in a community. What I would say is what I'm seeing when I go and visit, there is excitement with the folks who are there. The folks who are there
Oh.
are glad to be there.
Mm-hmm.
They're happy to, for some cases, they may just be, I'm there to speak on something, either through a mission moment or with the kids or deliver a message. If I'm delivering a message, I think someone was just like, "Hey, it's someone different we can hear from." Um, so, um, so I think that there's definitely a number of different factors. I will say, I the churches were pretty full when I was there. I mean, I won't say that they were,
Mm-hmm.
there were definitely still some seats open, and I'm sure the churches would love to welcome more folks.
Mm-hmm.
I heard one person who did church plants years ago always said, if there are people who aren't attending church, there's always a need for an additional church in a community.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that to a significant point. I think for many people, you just have to, as much as you want to go out and get the people to come, people need to be able to come and on their own as well. I know that was the way it was for me
Right.
when I came back into church. Was, you know, I knew it was time for me to come back, and
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I made my decisions. So they've
Yeah.
led me to doing this, and this is amazing work and work I love to do.
I have a great memory of the time you were with us the last time. I'm pretty sure that we assembled disaster relief kits.
Mhm.
So I think, as you've said, now you are up to 5 different kits that congregations can prepare. But I just have this memory, Adam, of one of our church school children standing side by side with one of our elders in our congregation, putting together the kits. It was a beautiful intergenerational moment.
Mhm.
And to think about those then disaster relief kits going to people who, heaven forbid that there is a natural disaster where people need assistance, but if they do need assistance, they're getting something from Church World Service that's helping them to navigate that period of time until they such a time as they can make a transition back into their homes, if they are in fact ever able to do that. But that again must be really gratifying for you to go out and to see those connections taking place between people of different ages and backgrounds working on a common cause, kind of bringing to life the original mission of Church World Service.
Absolutely. And I will say also very gratifying when you see the other end of it, when you see the people who are receiving the kits. I've gotten the
Oh, I'm
opportunity to
sure.
see
Yeah.
on a couple different scales. Um, Back a
Yeah.
few years ago, a group of us had the chance to go down to the U.S. Mexico border and see the support that
Okay.
CWS provides to the border shelters down there. And they had the CWS
Mm-hmm.
blankets, they had the kits. They're ready to hand to families, individuals who are coming over and looking to go on to that final leg to their journey to their new home or where they're hoping to live next. I also had the opportunity. Do you know Pastor Timothy Silva over? He used to be over at Newman Congregational in Rhode Island, but now he's up in the Boston area.
Yeah, I definitely recognize his name, but I don't know him personally.
Okay. So are you guys with the New York conference or are you with the SNE UCC conference?
Actually, we're an independent church, and so we are non-denominational.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So I had met him years ago, and their church was a depot for us. So people would bring the kids to their church in Rhode Island. And he and I met at a SNE UCC event in 2018. He said, "Hey, we want to get more involved. What about these blankets? Can we do something with these?" And I said, "Sure, absolutely. We can set up a blanket Sunday for you guys. And then we typically take the money raised and we distribute the blankets to communities affected by natural disasters, or to shelters for families in need." And he said, "Okay, let me run this by my missions committee, and we'll get back with you." And he did a couple weeks later, and he said, "Hey, we want to do this on Mother's Day, but we were wondering. You mentioned shelters. We work with a domestic violence shelter here in Rhode Island. Could we do something to get the blankets to go to them?" And I said, "Now keep in mind, I was on the job for maybe 9 months at this point."
Okay.
But I was a cocky 9-month. "Yeah, we can do that. I don't know how, but we'll make this happen." And
just name it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I told my boss what I had said. He said, "We'll figure it out. Don't worry. Let them do their thing." Because he said he didn't think they would raise more than enough for, say, 25 blankets. And so they had the service on Mother's Day. I got a chance to go down and speak. And he calls me up a couple weeks later. He goes, "Hey, you know how you said we could keep the blankets that we raised the money for the shelter that we're working with?" I said, "Absolutely." He goes, "Yeah, we raised enough for 125.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, "Okay, well, I will get you 125. I don't know how, but we will get you 125.
Wow.
And we did.
Never underestimate the church.
Exactly. And because of the nature of the shelter we were supporting, we're not allowed to go and speak or see things. But the stories that came back to me from the staff, from the volunteers, you knew the difference that we were making in so many lives.
Yeah, someone cares, right? From beyond the walls of the building, knowing that someone cares.
And especially for someone who's so vulnerable in the situation that they're in. But so I'm going to try and say this, and I hope I say this the right way. My heart breaks that we still need these types of shelters, but I'm glad that they're there for those who need them.
Yeah. Yep. A way to respond and care for those who really are in a desperate point in their lives, which it sounds like from everything you describe, Adam, that's Church World Services making its presence felt and its care felt for those who need that help, so that one day they may be able actually to turn around and exchange or extend that helping hand to someone else.
Yep.
So, well, I'm incredibly thrilled, not only that we've had this chance to talk, but that we're inviting you back to Round Hill Community Church. We're going to get to hear you, and we're then going to be assembling kits, which will go out in preparation for those who need them. Should that, so should something arise where those that kind of support is needed. So we wish you many blessings on your journey. We're thankful that you're doing what you're doing. You clearly seem called to it, and we wish you grace and peace for your journey into the future.
Thank you very much for your support. Thank you for having me on. We're truly blessed to have partners like you who support us and give us this opportunity to help those, as we say, our most vulnerable neighbors, and help lift them up as best we can.
Yeah. Adam, thank you again, and blessings.
Thank you.
Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, there are a few things that you can do that would make a big difference to us. Like the video, subscribe if you aren't, and click the notification bell and select all. Thank you.